Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're in YouTube and you see a little link down below, you can click on it and you'll see another link down below in Zoom, and you click on that and you'll end up in Makana, where you can ask questions. You can vote on those questions, talk amongst yourselves. It's a great place for you to, you're driving the whole conversation. So if you're watching this and you're in Makana, you're the producer. You're deciding what we're talking about and even when we're talking about it by voting on the questions. Now, if you think you can answer the questions, it'd be great to have you come in a little early. 6:40 a.m. is when we open up the mic checks. You need to be here by then to be part of the panel, this illustrious panel that we've collected here today. If you're not sure and you want to kind of work through your system and see how it's working, you can come in early. We open the doors at 6 o'clock a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and it'd be great to have you as part of that. It's a pretty casual conversation, other than working on people's connections. Some people we enjoy just chit chatting at 6, and you may find that you're not sure you want to interrupt because you're trying to work on your kit. The only reason we're opening at 6 is so that you can work on the system. So we're just talking and filling the time between that. So definitely feel free to jump on and be part of the conversation at 6 o'clock Pacific Standard Time or anytime after that. And we can kind of work through any audio or video issues that you might have. A lot of times people are a little worried about coming on to the panel, because they think that the panel knows so much. We know so much because of the individual experiences that everyone has, almost probably over a half a millennia of experience across all of us. But not any one of us has that knowledge in our head. And so, if you think you have a certain, just a little spike of knowledge in a certain area that might be able to add to what we're doing, we'd love to have you on the panel. That's that one question that comes up that you can answer, that you can be part of that conversation. So definitely, we're always excited to see new panelists and panelists return. So anyway, hopefully you'll jump on. First hour, of course, is general questions. We've got a lot of them coming in. Second hour is whatever we think is more important. We want to talk about something specifically for an hour. Today, we're going to have the team, the AWS team, Shirag and is Tucker here? Is Tucker? I don't think the scan. No, Tucker's not here today. Guy, not yet. Okay. Tucker, Guy, 1F, Jeff. So we got an incredible AWS crew. The first two have gone amazingly well, and so we'll have that in the second hour. Of course, Saturday is education for a couple hours, which is one of my favorite conversations, and so we have that in the morning, and then we're going to be having our last day of Resolve conversation with Ripple, or at least for now. And so if any questions that you have about Resolve, you can come in and bring it. It's about exporting, but really it's an open Q&A about Resolve. And then next week, we're going to start doing Unreal Engine. So stay tuned for that. All right, Bill, let's get going.
Rupert McCrae has our first question from Dallas, Texas. The so-called mega churches with arrays of broadcast and streaming outlets place high production value towards their remote audience. One example had about 50,000 local attendees a week and 7 million viewers around the world. Could a future of hybrid events learn something from this model?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Say no. And here's why I say no. Because hybrid is so hard to do, to efficiently engage the audience. The people that come to a church service, and I broadcast our church service and I've been involved with it for years, decades. When you broadcast a church service, you're broadcasting a church service. And if you're speaking of that one, probably it's my neighbor over here, Joel Osteen, that yes, he has a amazing following, but it's more than just a hybrid. At that point, it's a broadcast and it's a following, and their facility, I can tell you, it is probably above most all broadcast facilities. It's an amazing facility, millions and millions of dollars invested, but it's for that reason, that purpose.
And I'll argue that there are some that are already doing this, but there'll be more and more houses of worship that can do completely virtual. That's going to be the next trend, in my opinion, is that there's not really, it'll be a better service without all the people in the room. And it will be, the better audio and video quality, more engaged, more tied into the online audience. That's the next generation of this. So it is successful in a handful of places. But I would say that it's successful on a really large scale, in a way that isn't. Now, when I say that no one will be in the audience, there may be churches 100 of them that are all have 1,000 people in it that are all getting the same feed from the same person. And that's a much more effective way to do that. Chris, and then Roscoe.
Ever since the beginning of the pandemic, my family has been enjoying watching Elevation Church out of North Carolina. They do a great broadcast. They do some really weird things about how they do things live, but the point being is that their broadcast is great. But last week they played a song, and I went and looked for it on YouTube, and I saw an older clip of that song with the auditorium completely full of people, and it was weird to see. I mean, we haven't seen it. We're not used to watching that room full of people. And it was a little bit like, oh wow, are they going to get sick? but also it was just a huge emotional thing. And
I'm not gonna disagree that I think that people need to get together, and there is an emotional impact of people being together. I just don't know if you have to have the speaker and the people in the same room. Like that's the only thing I'll argue when they're all singing. Imagine, again, a lot of sites all doing it at the same time. You're limited in it's limiting.
One of the things that the pastor started doing with the auditorium closed was he asked the band to stay with him on stage, and they kind of like sit on stools like back in the background 20 feet away. And he goes, yeah, I need somebody here close by. Can you just sit there?
Again, that's a generational thing. I mean, a lot of theater, the actors in a lot of theater. I know that I felt like I needed people in the room when I was on stage, but film actors don't need that. And so it's just a matter of a change in the style and the type of person that is successful. You want to say something, Roscoe?
Yeah, I'm here in the county with Hour of Power and the Trinity Broadcast Network, and both of those have fallen, meaning they are not what they used to be. And the battle's always used to be over satellite control. So when Jim Baker lost his, show, then his satellites went over to this person, bought him out, that kind of stuff. So the question I have is, like Jeff Keithley, does this scale now? Is there going to be the same battle for infrastructure that there was back then?
Well, I know, absolutely. I don't think there's a battle for infrastructure at all. It all exists. It's all out there. It's the internet. So everybody has exacts, and that's the thing, is everybody has equal access to it. Where before, with Daycast and all those others that were doing what your TBN, nobody else had access. So you aspired to be good enough to package your church service and put it on their network. And I worked with a couple of those clients. One of those was from Africa, and they were well funded, but it was just a disaster to bring their level up to be able to reach that true broadcast level for satellite at the time. Now we could do things like Chris was saying, and I agree that Elevation Church is doing it right. What it comes down to, and I've found in my years of working in the churches, it's about that relationship that the preacher has with the people. And the whole Osteen family, they have that way of reaching into that lens and addressing that person and talking to that person. He knows how to do that. 90% of preachers out there do not.
Well, and to go past church and just talk about, generalize this conversation, is that everyone can be a broadcaster now, and everyone can have their own live network, and this is going to be, this next decade is going to be corporations realizing that they can be a live network, organizations realizing they can be a live network, educational institutions realizing they can be a live network, and everyone having that, and it doesn't mean they don't all have to get to 1 million viewers. They could have 50,000 viewers or 10,000 people that are really committed to that. All right, I'm going to keep moving. Next question.
Jake Perrin of Rockford says, I have several M1 Macs that will no longer let me use 1080i out. Whoops, hang on a second.
You skipped one there. Yeah,
did that wrong. Yeah, let me go back and get Tony Mobley's. Tony says almost everything is connected by Ethernet. iPhones and iPads are using Wi-Fi 6. And is it office hours reliable?
Should be. Everything's connected using Wi-Fi 6. No, not Wi-Fi is not going to. Charles, and then John.
So I changed a lot of my Wi-Fi to Wi-Fi 6, and still it is faster when it's working, but it's not reliable enough per a professional setting. It does cut out every once in a while. I would suggest if you are going to be on office hours, or if you're doing a meeting that is important or with a client, hardwire in all the time.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, it's important to know that the more items that you have connected to your Wi-Fi, the more chance of your Wi-Fi going into more of a sleep mode type feel and then coming back out, causing that ramp up is always going to happen, even if you went 6 gigabits
Well,
per second.
and the main thing is that
Wi-Fi
the and you're breaking up a little bit, Jeffrey.
I think you're on Wi-Fi.
It sounds like it sounds like you're on Wi-Fi. It's kind of funny.
No, I think I'm having an internet.
Okay. You can connect Ethernet to phones and iPads. So just that's just an adapter. It's a Lightning to USB, and then USB to Ethernet for the phone, and then a USB-C to Ethernet for the iPad, and it's useful. Next question.
Jake Perrin of Rockford says, I have several M1 Macs that will no longer let me use 1080i out. I'm using USB-C to HDMI cables with an Atem Television Studio HD. I've tried Blackmagic HDMI to SDI converters. I've held down the Option key while changing resolution, and I've tried apps like SwitchRes X. Any ideas?
Go ahead, Ken, and then Courtney.
A simple one. Get a Atem Mini Extreme ISO. That will solve that issue.
Yep. Go ahead, Courtney.
Get a decimator. MDHX will frame rate convert. And most of the Blackmagic converters that convert HDMI to SDI do not frame rate convert, so they don't resample the signal and change the frame rate, which is what you need to do. But the MDHX is about a $300 box.
And at almost the same price, possibly the same price as the decimator, you can buy Atem Mini.
That's true.
You can run it into the Atem Mini and then run it out, just pass it through there. And while you're passing it through there, you might want to use it. But it's a kind of an amazing little converter. But yeah, the older ones are much more sensitive to the to frame rate, because they don't have the Teranexes built into them. Next question.
Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas. Blackmagic is an Australian privately owned company. Last year, there seemed to be reports that they may go public on the Australian Stock Exchange. Seemingly no news since. Any thoughts?
Charles?
I would guess that Grant does not need to do an IPO. Usually an IPO is because you need to raise money in the beginning. Also, once you are publicly traded, you are at the whim of the public and how they feel on that particular day. And since he's been able to build from the ground up a very lucrative and successful company, I don't believe that he needs to do an IPO. He's doing great.
I think that Blackmagic is limited by the fact that it bottlenecks through Grant. So it's not money. I think that the impression I get is always whatever Grant's interested in is what's coming out of Blackmagic. And so the result is that I don't think they need more money. I think they need more grants, or more people that Grant's willing to hand stuff off to just kind of run on its own. And I think that, but I think they make as much money as they can make inside of that limited pipeline. And that's not unusual in the sense, well, it is unusual, but many companies that have done extremely well. So a good example is Apple. Apple was what Steve was thinking about. And that was, and didn't do a ton of other things in that case. We've got the WLM meters keep on switching. Is there a reason for that? Who's doing WLM meters?
I have no idea. It's annoying, isn't it?
Yeah, can you send that off? Just kick it off. Just kick WLM meters off. It's flipping. In general, I need people to leave their thing on. I don't really know what's going on with some of these. Sorry for the interruption, but can we kick WLM meters? I don't have control. I need a co-host or a host to kick WLM meters.
They're gone.
All right. Next question.
Sky Gleason of Seattle says, thank you, Jan Landy. Thanks to
So
Jan
I'm
Landy.
sorry. WLM meters is still here. Like what? Okay. Sorry. It was just not going. All right. Next question. And by the way, new rule. Number one, Jeff will keep it on because obviously that's part of the show for the next one. if you keep it, there's starting to become a behavior of people clicking they're turning on and off and showing their email or showing other things like that. I will kick you off and not bring you back on the panel if you do that. I'm just going to let everybody know that. like anything that it feels like
That's not me.
No, it's not you. I'm saying
no, but I'm saying that's not me. That's
that Jeff Keithley. Oh,
that is not me.
Then kick that off too. I thought you were going to use that as a demo for AWS or something like that. So kick the other Jeff.
Okay, I'll do that.
Other Jeff Keithley off, and yeah, don't like if you pause your. I need everyone to have some kind of image in there. Like if you pause your image, it can be black, it can be whatever, but we just got to tighten this up. I'm seeing a behavior that's beginning that we need to turn off. All right, next question.
Sky Gleason, Seattle. Thank you, Jan Landy. Thanks to Jan Landy. May be possible for Mad in the Kitchen to move into a historic but currently closed Seattle restaurant attached to a small theater. If we get the space, what recommendations would Team Office Hours suggest as to how I build out the kitchen set for 8 episodes of Mad in the Kitchen and Office Hours as a show?
Well, go ahead, Jeff.
Talked about this last night. You happen to have me, Jeff?
Different Jeff. Jeff Francis first, and then Jeff.
All right, go ahead.
Mine is first a question is what's the ceiling height in the kitchen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that to build this out, one of the things we'd love to see is pictures. So the number one suggestion I have is go get a lot of photos. Like think of like 100, 150 photos. You want to shoot from the corners, from the far corners in, and then around, and then details, and then some basic measurements. To Jeff's point. You have anything else, Jeff Francis? Is that the first thing?
I was going to say
that's my first question.
Space.
LiDAR.
What's the space?
LiDAR helpful?
If you have LiDAR, yeah.
Yeah, we do.
No, well, not the phone LiDAR though. Phone LiDAR, I don't think will be that yet. Well, you could try it, see if it works.
I know I've heard that the kitchen is in the basement of what used to be the El Gaucho, which is now the Crocodile, and consequently it's a small 15 by 15, but it does have gas. And Chris is shaking his head no.
15 by 15.
I know,
is a
feels really small,
tight
Dad.
space. You don't want to work in that space. Look at how much space you used at the pizza oven.
Yeah, 15 by 15 is smaller than my garage.
Yeah, that's less than a 2-car garage.
Hey, we're
Where's
getting chat bombed right now.
Yeah.
So somebody needs to blast somebody out of there.
Yeah.
Okay. Fun.
Anyway, a little storm. Fortunately, you don't have to deal with it in most places. So anyway,
so take pictures, ceiling height, measurements, if it happens. So okay. Anything else?
Then you're going to want to think about you're just going to want to think about what cameras. I think that you will, for 8 episodes, if there's any way we can find a way to get you an extreme, it'd be nice to have more than 4 inputs available to you, but we'll see what we can do there. So, and then I would really try to stick to all Blackmagic cameras so that we can shade them and get rid of all this multiple camera stuff. The only place that I would change that is possibly some PTZs from ceiling. That's it just depends on what you can get, so, hanging PTZs from the ceiling for close-ups is amazing. That'd be the only place that I might not do that. But otherwise I would stick with cameras that we can shade remotely. Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say
when you
PTZs
do.
Also,
sorry,
sure.
We got to keep on doing.
Still the same way.
I'll call you 1F, Jeff.
Why not? Yeah.
Okay, Jeff Francis, go ahead.
While you're doing the site survey, if you can do it at the same time that you'll be shooting the show, listen carefully for external noises. See what's going on in the neighborhood when garbage trucks are picking up. Is this a high traffic area? Noise can be a problem.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Jeff Keithley.
I'm glad to contribute. Scott, let's talk. We were talking just a little bit late last night about doing this. You've got a lot of brains here that can help you in your production jump, and distributed workflow is a thing. It's absolutely a thing.
Thank you, sir. Yes, there's some amazing opportunities that have rolled in the door, and we'll announce them as they become available.
Yeah, and one of the things is that because of a bunch of pipeline stuff that we're supporting in that area, we'll probably still do it through hardware on our end for the beginning, for the first couple episodes, because we're supporting that process, and then we are planning to slowly try to figure out a way to do it in the cloud. Next question.
John Pewitt of Huntersville. When talking about office hours cutting, what's the difference between spotlighting and pinning?
I don't think pin is when it's being cut. I don't think pin affects the. I don't know if a pin affects it. Go ahead, Taylor.
Pin is your personal view. So if you want to pin somebody's video and you want your personal view to remain on their video, that's pinning. If you spotlight something, especially if you're have the authority or you're a presenter or a host, if you spotlight something, essentially you're pinning it or you're displaying it. You're altering everybody's view, not just your own. And that's my understanding of the difference.
Yeah, and I think that it's just, I just don't know whether when the host pins, whether that's actually something that's affected there. Next question.
Nick Goodfriend of Bedford, New York, and here on the panel today said, did anyone else see the Hopin event on Thursday? And if so, any comments?
I have not. I think Hopin's in a lot of trouble with the new Zoom, the new Zoom API, the video API. I've been doing some research on it. We're going to talk about it next week because basically everybody has an enormous amount of capacity now. Go ahead, Nick.
Only that they bollocks again, and they've got 3 acquisitions in this quarter, and they bollocks the video badly. It was not a well-run event. I think the platform's pretty cool and it has a place. I haven't had an opportunity to mess with the new Zoom tools, but and I did in their networking, which I know Alex hates. I did first person I met was Leo from London and some other folks, and I'm interested in the chat for clients, in the tool for clients. But other than that, it was not a well-organized event. It wasn't even live.
I mean, the hard part really is a lot of people seem to be good at throwing bits around. They just don't understand the basic construction of a show. And it worries you when the company who is trying to sell you event systems can't figure out how to do the event. It doesn't lead you to believe that they really understand the pipeline or the process. They're not taking it seriously. And a lot of it is I'm sure that Hopin is trying to, use their own, dog food, everything that they're doing rather than just making it work. And go ahead.
Yeah, I just didn't understand why they couldn't pull off the actual event. The platform is okay. They didn't hire people. The video is terrible. The flow is bad.
My experience has been is because they want to be able to tell people, hey, we just did this with available hardware and the people. This is just the way you would do it, right? And so the problem is that the way to do this is actually not just the way that the average person would do it. The way to do a large event is with real hardware and real teams. Go ahead, Nick. Yep. Next question.
Carl Marzer of New York says, I have an ATEM Mini Pro Extreme ISO and a HyperDeck Studio Mini. I do live multi-camera production with video playback within the show. What iPad control software are people using for remote control?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff. And then Guy.
Me? Okay. So
sorry.
The Sienna. Sienna has a great use that actually can control it. You do have to worry if you're doing real remote, not just local LAN remote. If you're doing real remote, then you do need to work on VLANs to be able to go across the internet securely. And Hamachi is a great software VLAN that works really well, or go deeper into a actual hardware site-to-site if you need to, but you will have to punch to that local machine somewhere. And yeah, the Sienna, I forget the name of it, but just go to sienna.tv, I believe is what their host website, but they do other stuff than just NDI. They actually have an app that they develop for the control of the ATEM.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, one of the ones that I like is Strata. It looks like this, and you have some settings that you can adjust. It's one of the more high-end apps for locally controlling your ATEM. So that's the one that I would recommend is Strata Pro. There's 3 different ones: Strata Pro, Strata Lite, and Strata something else. This one looks pretty intense and would work nicely with ATEM. The other ones are simpler and do offer, the ATEM Mini one offers streaming and record control as well. So Strata, it's in the App Store.
Go ahead, Beijing.
Yeah, there's a new one right now, which has a beta come out right now, mixeffect.app. I put the link in the chat, and that seems to be pretty powerful, and it seems to offer most of the features that Strata has, and including the streaming controls, etc.
Next question.
Charles Klein here in the panel from New York City. What 7200 RPM drives do the panelists prefer? I use data center drives for my large capacity RAIDs, looking for other possible options.
Does anyone have any strong opinions about spinning drives? I think I've used a lot of Western Digital. Go ahead, John.
I'm of the theory that Google uses, which is to say, buy a bunch of drives. They're really cheap and make them redundant. And that way, if one fails, you've got the data somewhere else and you've not overinvested.
Well,
that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I don't go too crazy with the really, really expensive ones, but I find that 10 terabytes right now is the turn point where you can, or either 8, I think it's 8 terabytes those drives are like $150 or for 7200 RPM. And then when you go over that, it starts to get astronomically expensive. And go ahead, George.
So I've been using the Iron Wolf for a couple of years. It was the Western Digital Iron Wolves, and they've been pretty solid.
Go ahead, Sky.
Isn't it the fact that there are really only 2 manufacturers of hard drives, and it's Western, and then the different enclosures are the different manufacturers, but the actual drives are
I think they're all made in one town in Thailand or something.
Yeah,
they're all
Seagate or Western.
I think it's Seagate and Western Digital, but I think they're all made. There was a flood at some point. We couldn't buy any drives. That's the only reason I know. So one bad rain season and there was no drives available.
And again, what is the difference between an enterprise drive versus a off the shelf, Home Depot?
They're definitely the enterprise. There's definitely a big difference. They're designed to be rewritten and run constantly and under a lot more pressure, and so the quality of the components is different. Doug and then Jeff.
Yeah, I have a lot of drives. Seagate and Hitachi are good ones as well. But the big thing about drives is not if they're going to fail; it's when they're going to fail. So have a good backup plan, whether it's a RAID or just backing up your data, because all spinning drives will fail at some point.
Good, Jeff.
That's exactly what I was going to say. There are difference in levels. We always joke internally here that it's just a different sticker. It's the same drive, but it's a different sticker. But I've definitely seen enterprise or RAID specific drives are going to they're going to last longer. They may not give you the best of throughput in some of the applications, but that's where RAIDs come into play anyway. But there is definitely a difference in performance on drives. But yeah, we are down to like 2 manufacturers, and I think it's one guy going back and forth between 2 factories actually.
Yeah, exactly. Good, Charles.
Yeah. I was asking because I need to build about like 100 terabyte RAID or so, and I've used a lot of data center ones. I tend to certify all my drives before I use them, just to make sure that I don't have any bad blocks. So that's like a 48-hour process, but that saved me in the past. And I was looking to see what other options people have been using. I use my NVMe just for my day-to-day work, but I need to build about 100 terabyte.
Do you know what enclosure have you picked an enclosure yet?
I'm still debating. I was looking at maybe 2 of the OWC 8 bay.
Yeah.
And
Doug, you have a really large one, don't you, Doug?
Yeah, I just invested in 45 drives, and I had a long conversation with these guys, and I did some research because I own some Drobos and I have a QNAP over there, but 45 drives was built for media and
that's the company's. It's not 45 drives. It's the company's 45 drives.
Yeah, that's the name of the company. And they have different types of RAIDs. We bought a RAID that can hold 30 hard drives, and we only filled it with 10, like 10, 12 terabyte drives. That way, it wasn't such a huge investment. I mean, it was a huge investment to buy the drive itself, but as we grow, all we have to do now is just buy, 10 more drives and add that to the volumes. But they were a super great company to work with, and their stuff really is backed up by, they're working in what we're doing here in the media world.
John Pruitt, real quick, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, Charles, if you're going to that level of trouble to set up your array, I would recommend running SpinRite on the drives before you put them into service. That'll catch any errors on the drives and any on the disk prior to them going into service.
That's great. Next question.
Jesse Mills, San Francisco. What is the most reliable NDI routing system software that can create custom panels utilizing an NDI discovery server? Rascular Route Master, Sienna NDI router, Zen NDI router, or something else maybe?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I've used and tried them all. If you want the ultimate in flexibility and also reliability, the Sienna NDI router, hands down. One of our clients recently hit the not a limit, but they hit the all-time record, I guess you would call it. They were at a 500 by 500 in their VPC. Now, this is in the cloud, but it still applies if you're on the ground in on-prem too. They were on a 500 by 500 configuration. They had to up it because of the number of shows they were doing to 1,000 by 1,000 inputs, 1,000 inputs, 1,000 outputs. And they did somewhere around, I think it was 600 on the input side and 968 on the output side. And so that is scalability 100%. And that is amazing reliability that you could build a panel to do whatever you want. You can use hardware panels to address it also. It's worth the investment if you're talking about larger scale. It may be hard to stomach for some smaller scale stuff. That little 20 by 20 router, the one of them that you mentioned there is decent. Martin's stuff is decent also. But if you're needing to be able to grow and you want to be able to grow it with one system instead of having to do this one, fill it up. My experience in building trucks has always been buy the router as big as you possibly can. Then plan on buying the next one because you're going to fill up the one you just bought.
Next question.
Chris Fritchie of Trondle, Texas, and here on the panel says, Alex, can you give a quick answer as to why you think the trade show model doesn't work and seems to be moving to a virtual event? Did COVID cause this, or was the traditional trade show model already on its way out?
I think that there'll still be trade shows. I don't want to say that there's definitely some that, like the fancy food trade show that happens in San Francisco, that one's probably going to stay around because you get to walk around and eat stuff. You know, it's hard to do that over Zoom. But I do think that I think that companies are going to start thinking about, do people really need to touch the things to get what they need out of it? You know, good examples, I went to NAB and I had to figure out I needed to buy a router bigger than what Blackmagic, or more flexible than what Blackmagic makes. And so I'm going to Ross, looking at the Ultrix, going to Utah Scientific, looking at, what they're doing. And what I was looking for was access to a technical engineer to answer my questions. I don't need to touch the router to do that. I don't need to look at the router. I mean, it's kind of cool to walk around in it, but I don't really need to do that. I just needed to know how the inputs and outputs work. Now, the problem is that most companies don't have the ability to show me that very well in their office, right? Before Zoom and without the cameras and everything else. But at this point, it would be easier in a lot of ways if built a system that lets them, multi-camera with a telestrator, with the ability to preview, like rotate around 3D models and annotate things and everything else. They could actually probably tell you more than they could on the show floor about their product. And now I used to also be a trade show, a demo artist for a company called Electric Image back in the 90s. And so my job was to sit there and answer people's questions. I'd sit around and there's a big booth. There's 4 or 5 of us that sit there and answer your questions. 90% of the questions were about 4 things, like what's the new product? How do I do this thing? And they were all the same. And so I repeat them. I literally lost my voice every time I did it, repeating the same thing over and over again, rather than just telling 1,100 people online that answer once. And so the thing is that it is, the booths are incredibly inefficient. And I'm not saying that there are definitely, people will bring up examples of things, and there's definitely examples of where it'd be good to, you can't listen to audio gear, like you can't, you can't see HDR through Zoom. You can't, there's a bunch of things that you need to be there to get. But I would say that is an edge case, not the middle of what trade shows do. Most trade shows, what they're there to do is so that you can actually talk to that person. Well, you could do that online, and have that conversation. And so I think that companies that are looking purely at ROI, in that area, there's going to be a transition point. But a lot of them are going to find that if they're spending that trade show money on building a little studio and then supporting their clients all the time, they probably get more out of it. Would they lose a couple people? Absolutely. Would people complain that they're not there? Absolutely. But if you're able to engage with your audience, if you took that money for one trade booth of $80 to $100,000, $150,000, $2 million in some cases, for some of these trade booths, and you put that into a studio, that's a one-time investment instead of doing it a couple times a year. Then you're now able to do this every week, have these conversations every week. I mean, I truly believe that what we're doing here is a guide to what could be done. Every company could be doing what we're doing here every day, every week, whatever you wanted to do, where you're answering those questions. And it would start small, but if you have a passionate client base that is constantly looking for how to use your products better, it would be valuable. Like I just bought a new cappuccino machine. You think that, there's just random videos that I have to find to figure it out. And I can't quite figure out how to do this one little part. And I'm finding little YouTube videos, but if they had something up there that was there where they had interactive discussion, I would go to it, to figure out how to use this little product that I just bought, that I didn't have to go to the Williams-Sonoma to look at. I didn't need to go to Sur La Table or whatever. I just bought it on Amazon. I looked at all the reviews. It was reviewed really well. And then I bought it. Right. And so it showed up. And so we used to think that we had to touch all that stuff, and we don't, and so I think that what we do need to do is be able to have a deep conversation about the product with the client. But I think that in many instances, and I would say 85 to 90% of the instances, a well-built studio could answer that question better than a trade show. And that's the thing that people will eventually get. They're starting to come around. I mean, we're talking to companies that are thinking about building little studios to do that. But having that Q&A, and imagine like having a big event where you have a product launch. Like we had we worked with a company years ago where we did a product launch for them, and we had engineers in the back end answering questions via text, and then a show that you were watching. So there's, I don't know how many, a couple thousand people watching. We were answering in that thing, we were answering about 200 questions an hour. So we were able to, because we had the engineers doing it over text, the biggest questions went to the show. And it was like this, you were able to launch a product and have everybody walk away knowing what that product does, and had all their questions answered, and had all those things, and as we go into, being able to have breakout rooms and everything else, you have a big event. You answer 400 questions, over 2 hours about your product that you're launching. And then you have a whole bunch of breakout rooms that they can go and talk to more engineers who all have studios. And all of that would have cost less than going to one trade booth where you have people standing around answering questions, one person at a time. I mean, it is brutally inefficient. Like trade shows, expos are, and I've worked in expos for 30 years, and there was some point where I stopped enjoying it and started realizing, wow, this is a huge waste of money, huge waste of carbon, huge waste of, and again, there are definitely ones that, like the fancy food show and some sound ones and some other ones that you need to be there to get it. But that's not the middle of the road trade show. Most of them are like those little pop-ups where there's just some sales rep that's going to answer your question. Anyway, that's my not so short answer. We had not enough questions, so I figured I'd just go ahead and answer it. Anyway, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, and that transition started well before COVID. I mean, I think that people were shocked a bit when Apple started to pull away from those centralized events and just started to have its own events on its own schedule. And they had the resources, they had the following to do that. But since then, there's companies now. I'm in education, of course, and the Epic is one company that, for example, every single week they do an education Twitch stream, and they just pick a topic and they're talking about that. And prior to all of that, I would have contact with Unreal or an Epic, once a year at the SIGGRAPH conference, and they would, have a little 1 hour session and tell you about the new things and what they want to do for educators. And there was far less information in that, once a year event than there is on, now they have a 2 hour event every week. And if I miss it, I can watch it after the fact.
Yeah. And one of the primary problems right now that Hopin is kind of going towards, but not very effectively, is the Q&A system of the ability to interact like what we have here doesn't exist, for most people. And so it's not the problem with the trade. What right now the problem is that there's not good tools to actually interact powerfully. If you do it on YouTube, like people will stream to YouTube, you do it on YouTube, I mean, it's garbage. You know, the comments are garbage, and the you know, the comments on Facebook are half garbage, and the comments on Twitch are hieroglyphics, you know, for the most part. I literally feel like we've gone back. You like Twitch stream, it's just all emojis. Nick and then Chris. Nick, good friend.
Yeah,
And,
I was just going to say that like the coffee analogy is really good, because most of the companies can't put out the detail you want to sort out later, but one YouTube video, 5 minutes, same with guitar gear, the stuff that you can't answer in practice at a trade show, you can watch a 5-minute video or 2 5-minute videos and your problem solved.
Or 10 1-minute video. Like the problem that I really have is that, you know, that all of the stuff is in long form. You know, it's 10 minutes, 20 minutes. I just want to know how to do this one thing. And if you just got down to just making 100 little 1-minute videos that I can patch, that I can go find. And then again, live streams, what's missing is that having a barista, for instance, in my case, having a barista there with the machine. If there was something that told me after I bought it that there was we're going to do a live stream once a month where we just answer questions of people who bought this machine. I mean, it's a Breville. It's not like they're selling 10 of them, you know, like, you know, and so the people would show up and they'd want to improve their craft. And then, and people who get good at their craft and feel connected to the company are more likely to tell all their friends, oh, that was amazing. Or leave good comments on, you know, which is what drives people to buy things, is building that connection. And you're giving up building that connection by limiting yourself to who can show up at the trade show. Chris, and then Courtney, and then Liberty.
Yeah. So yesterday I sat in a meeting. I think there was 9 marketing managers, and we were talking exactly about this, what to do about upcoming trade shows and such. And the thing I found the most interesting about it was I spoke first. I went about 15 minutes on kind of the stuff we talk about here, Alex, basically what you just broke down, but you know, not as detailed as that. And after I was done, you know, it was like, okay, well, that's good. Does anybody else have a reason why we should continue the trade shows? And the answers were, well, we have to be able to give away shirts. We have to be able to scan their badge and get their contact info. And we had a couple.
Which, by the way, you can mail them the shirts if you want.
Exactly.
But the other thing is, scanning the badge was so that you could get their contact information, which is what you get when you do an online event. It's like, it's much more efficient.
Then we had a couple of the presidents were in the meeting. And of course, their concern was, well, you know, I have to be able to take people out and, you know, have dinner and all this stuff. So at the end of the meeting, I just asked off the cuff, I said, so other than, I'm sorry, that's what I asked when I got those answers. But I mentioned to him, I said, well, we have a meeting here full of marketing people. There's 9 or 10 marketing people in here. And even though we're in marketing, every one of us has a different motive for wanting to be at that trade show. I said, my motive is to go and set up the booth and make my boss happy and make sure everybody has everything they need. But I also shoot the live demos when we run our units outside. So my concern is getting video. Whereas, you know, this person's concern might be, I've been told that when I come back, I have to have 3,000 new contacts. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of, I think a lot of companies are going to be in the same boat where you might have marketing, but even within marketing, there's levels of what's important to somebody else. And
right. Well, and again, we'll go to Courtney and Liberty in just a second, then we'll move on. But the thing to think about is, number one, again, the virtual event, you could set up cameras and shoot something that is really cool for people to watch and interact with you in a way that you couldn't do at the booth. You know, like, you know, outside you find the perfect location, you have it all built up, you've got drones flying over, you got whatever, you know, like all the things that you want, you can do that in a way that you couldn't do at the booth. So you have a better impact. You can send people the t-shirts if they sign up. You're going to get all those contacts from doing the event that is coming if you build it out. And the big companies, like, I mean, some of the companies I've worked with, what they do for I need to take people out is they bring everybody in, and they, you know, the people who matter and who are buying, you know, millions and millions of dollars from them, and they have a little event, you know, that we can't do right now, but we will be able to. And that's way more special than taking them to some dinner. Courtney, and then Liberty, and we'll move on.
Yeah, one thing I miss from the actual in-event type of conferences, especially for technical equipment, a lot of times they'll have prototypes there, and they'll be announcing the stuff that'll be coming out in 6 months. So you won't be able to have experience with that equipment yet. You can find the engineers at the show itself and drill down and ask the difficult questions. And a lot of times you can make suggestions which end up in the product. So you have a chance before the product is even released to affect the product that you want to buy to make it come out. And I've done
and you
that
couldn't do
many
that
times.
online? You couldn't do that online?
I don't think so, because they're not willing, for a big event, they're not going to hold up the whole event for you to ask some inane question about some, something that.
But if you had a big event and then you had breakouts, then you could go in and you could have those conversations.
Possibly, but I haven't seen it happen yet.
Go ahead, Liberty.
And Chris, were right on track, because what I was saying is, like, we have all these companies, or their teams are working in silos. So they're only really thinking about their objectives, versus there was a company who called us out late last year, and it's robotics. They built a showroom, and thinking of the touch points of being able to, when clients come in, or being able to stream and broadcast there, that once these teams can get past that and realize, okay, how many touch points beyond just this one event, because they're still thinking just about the one event versus the overall experience and the long tail. When you have the event booth, yes, you see people, you can count those numbers, but just having even a better understanding of the long tail game and people coming back to these videos and that experience and what you can do beyond that.
Well, and being able to be doing something once a week or once a month and constantly
Exactly.
interacting and constantly error correcting and constantly building people's knowledge. Go ahead, Chris, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, thanks for that, Liberty. Yeah, so when all that was done, I basically told them, I said, well, hey, they said, well, what would you do in that? And I said, well, tomorrow I could do a 4-camera shoot live and we can answer questions in real time, and not one eyebrow batted. I mean, they don't know what that means. So I'm sure that the people I was speaking to are like a lot of other people, where when we say that in here, we're like, oh yeah, and our brains are already working and we're going over to, oh, I can set this up. But it's still in the industry.
It's
There's
usually,
like, I don't even know what that means.
Well, and it's why we're doing things, where we're going to show how those things work, as opposed, we're going to keep on doing tests where we can show people what that looks like. And what we do here is part of the example. We have companies that are modeling things that they want to do in the future based on what we're doing here. Next question.
Dan Huber of Erie, Pennsylvania says, I remember Chris or Guy talking about an HDMI gadget that makes your Mac think it's outputting a second or even a third monitor for a Zoom room. Can you go over how that works again?
That's the HDMI emulator. It's like a little, looks like a little key. I can't think of what it's called, but you put it into the HDMI input and it returns the signal back to the Mac that says, I'm a monitor. It just doesn't go anywhere. And the Mac will then go, okay, you've got 2 monitors, and it'll show them there. And the reason you do that, of course, is stuff like Zoom will not give you the second window if you don't have a second monitor. It says, and so if you put the simulator in, you can get that second screen to pop up. I don't know of any other real use. I don't know why else they exist. I'm sure that there's other things, but there's 2 monitor experiences that you can't create otherwise. Go ahead, Beju, and then Dan.
Yeah, especially with graphics cards from like NVIDIA or ATI, if you don't have something plugged into the HDMI for that, it will often default to the built-in internal graphics card. So if you really need to, especially if you're running it headless, you definitely need to have something plugged in.
Got it. That's the business model. Go ahead, Dan.
I see. So it's not like sending black. It's just letting Zoom
send it,
recognize, and then now I can, in the Zoom room interface, I can put whatever I want because it detects the monitor.
It detects the monitor. Now it says, oh, you've got 2 monitors or 3 monitors, and then you could, if you wanted to, then have all those windows on one monitor if you wanted to, and then those windows would be. I don't know if it would do that, because I think they all want to be full screen, don't they? No. Can you make them less?
You
than
can
full
pick
screen?
which kind you want. They're on Amazon. They're just called HDMI dummy plugs, and so you can pick them up as 1920 by 1080 or fixed resolution of 3840 by 2160. So just search on Amazon.
Next question. They're like $15, right? They're not very expensive. They're just, yeah. Next question.
Eddie Martinez of Sacramento said, what are the concerns with an XLR feed from the board at a show venue? What backups or alternative miking would you suggest? And using a MixPre II into the camera's HDMI and Atem Mini.
Go ahead, Jeff Francis, and then Bill.
First thing I'd worry about is a ground loop between your system and the board. Second is, I asked Eddie, he said this is a dance recital, so they're probably using pre-recorded music. Likely the PA is going to be in mono, but you'd love to have that in stereo for your stream and your capture. So make sure that you can get stereo out of their board, even though they're running things in mono. Backup, if you have some stereo pair you can put in the room to pick up what's going on in there, that could be a backup. If you have a camera that's a camcorder that's got built-in mics, make sure you turn off the automatic gain control, and you could use that as a backup, or a small like Zoom H4, H6 little portable recorder could be a good backup.
Go ahead, Bill, and then Tim.
For a dance recital where it's all pre-recorded, you don't have too much exposure. For a normal concert where somebody's mixing music or something like that, taking a board feed is almost always a bad idea, because the mixing, the front of house mixer, the FOH mixer, will be mixing for that room. So if they have a dance thing going on and they want to crank up the bass, or if they're having trouble with feedback and they want to lower high frequencies or mid-range, that's going to come out of the board and into your recording. So they're adjusting things that are going to your tape or your recording medium. That is a really bad idea. So the way to do that properly is to try to take channel inserts and get a clean signal from the microphones and all the sources into a separate recorder, so you can mix for what you're doing afterwards.
Tim?
Yeah, my question is, what failure are you trying to protect yourself for? Because you only have one mixing console. So if that goes down, you lose all your feeds because you've lost the PA, you've lost the feed to the camera, you've lost the feed to any recorder. Will a console die? I think in 40 years, I've had 2 console failures, and one of them was on a fairly high profile gig. It just happened to break, fortunately. But yeah, one feed to one camera, another feed to another camera with open mics, and a clean feed, as Bill pointed out. I think that's probably the big thing, because I use an aux like I would use maybe to create a mix minus, but I just want a post fader aux that I can send to record. So that way, when they go fade it now, the kids aren't moving, I can do that.
Yep. Jeff?
To deal with the ground loop issue, some kind of transformer isolation line level box, radial design, radial makes a really nice ISO box. Also like Radio Design Labs, those kind of places will have a transformer ISO.
The radial ice cube will save your camera input when somebody decides to throw plus 48 back at the console, or pardon me, save the console.
Yeah. The other thing is that if for some reason it's large enough that they've decided to put a mult box in, if you've got the juice, try to get an aux out as opposed to not taking from the mult. It's usually a hive of ground loops. All right, next question.
Moving on to Alex Olignowicz of Toronto. Has anybody experienced that a Camlink 4K makes Zoom crash, but only Zoom?
I think we'd have to test it. I can imagine that it's not stepping down. Go ahead, Chris.
I know for a fact that Laura Seal on the panel, she uses one, and I've never seen her have issues. She uses it as her main input, I believe.
Also, if you put that question in again, just let us know whether it's PC or Mac, so we just know what operating system is looking at that. Next question.
Jason Robertshaw of Sarasota, Florida says, best practices and techniques and things to avoid when creating a virtual tour. I need to create a repeatable virtual tour of a zoo aquarium delivered over Zoom. The walkthrough will be recorded footage and photos over a live presenter in studio or on green screen. The audience is K to 12. Mac workflow. Note, total runtime of the program will be 30 to 45 minutes. Exhibit spaces are really dark with low light.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Practice, definitely have a Zoom assistant, and so that you can see the class that you're presenting to, and you can capture questions from them. K through 12, they might just be raising their hand and asking their question over Zoom. This is also a great place for a telestrator, so that you could pause a video and you could do what Alex is showing on his image, which you're probably not seeing at the moment, but it's going to switch over, and you can show things in the zoo.
I mean, by the way, I've learned in meetings that this is really nice. I can just kind of sit over to one side, and then I can start, drawing. I have my little blackboard right behind me, and go through like that. So being able to draw that, but also being able to circle things, a telestrator is kind of useful, and it can be done with an Atem and little art program. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Two things. One is get your portal mini or some sort of portal to get your resolution up to 720p minimum. And then if you can get your hands on a Blackmagic Pocket 6K or another very good low light camera, since you mentioned you're in low light, that will radically improve your quality.
The best camera for this, the best is a Canon ME20, I believe is either 20ME or ME20. That's expensive, but for less money, you can rent one, is the ME200, which is, I think the ME200 has an ISO of 1 million or close to it, and the ME20 has an ISO of over 4 million. We've actually used ME20s in the field where you couldn't see in front of you, and we were putting out a usable video signal. Like literally it was black. But they're only 1080p because they basically are full frame sensor with photo sites that are only 1080p. Liberty, and then Nick, real quick, we're going to jump to the next questions at the top of the hour.
And since it's K through 12, keeping that content moving really quickly. So it's not necessarily technical, but short snackable pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick?
Yeah, I think to point out that the virtual tour in this case is going to be pre-recorded. So, with low light, you can get a lot of mileage out of photographs, long exposure photographs, sharp photographs. If you pre-record lots of interesting moments and have something of a library of photos, almost like if you're at all familiar with a soundboard where you can tap a button and you get your Wilhelm scream right away. And that way the person delivering the live component over Zoom has plenty of material to jump to based on the questions that are coming in from the kids, because of course the big best practice is to be focused on what they're interested in that moment. And so more of a library of short pieces that you could talk about and go to when the question is asked is really, really useful.
Absolutely. Like having a short little thing at the beginning, and to what Liberty was saying and Nick was saying, is snackable little bits and pieces that you can show. Oh, you're interested in this. Let me show you this. Let me show you this. And they can be images. But again, think about renting something like an ME20 or ME200. You can get great footage, even in low light, that you only have to rent once, and shoot all the footage for a day. And that might save you a lot of time and quality. And then you just need something that plays back like QLab or MIDI or something like that, that can let you play back lots of things as you need it, not in a row when you plan to do it, but as they're asking questions. Chris, real quick, and then we'll move on to the next question.
I personally would do that because I have it. I would do it in Mimo, and you could actually wire each one of those videos to a button on your Stream Deck. So you just say, well, let's go look at the otters. Boom, you hit the otter button and it'll take over and play it. It'd be really cool.
Memo Live would be a great solution for this. Next question.
It comes from Alvis, and I believe it's Lesdinas or something, but I'm going to do that badly. Sorry. From Riga, Latvia. How do you get sound into a Zoom meeting? Do you use separate audio, a separate audio interface, or embed sound in HDMI or SDI?
A lot of us use separate interfaces. That's pretty common if we're using USB pres. I mean, most of the time we're putting them in separate interfaces, but it can be embedded. I think that you have more control when you have them come in separately. Next question.
Moving on to Steve Fisher of Pittsburgh, and Steve wants to know NDI tools on Teradici. I have installed it, yet I can't seem to find the virtual inputs to change the source to vMix audio master. Any ideas where I might have misstepped in the install process of NDI tools that the virtual inputs aren't available to me? I was hoping that wasn't an AWS.
Keep going, Jeff. Sorry, we're in a rush.
That is kind of more towards the cloud thing. Why don't we address it next time? Not to put it off, but let's put it off.
Next time, you mean the next Friday or
no,
next?
Like
in a minute. Okay, we'll just
in 30 seconds.
It's technically an AWS question.
Okay, next question.
The ones that aren't marked, I'm not getting. Tommy Shantz says, would it be what would be the question format in such a large virtual trade show? VTS?
Go ahead, John.
Makana?
Yes.
I think that's the ideal.
We're working on getting it out there. So there's not a lot. There's also Slido. A lot of people are using successfully for that as well. Next question.
And Jonas Dotel has our last one. Is there a public bug tracker for Zoom?
I think it's support .zoom.us. I think is a place where you can send in bugs. But I don't know if you can vote on them or other things like that. So, all right. we have gotten to the top of the hour. We got through those questions. I was a little worried. First, I didn't think we had enough questions, and I thought we had too many. So that's the way it works. Anyway, so now we're at the top of the hour, and back to our part 3 of AWS. And who is doing? Is Tucker doing the presentation, or is someone else? Jeff, go ahead. You're doing the presentation. This is your
a
game.
little bit of it.
How long is your presentation?
11 minutes 32 seconds.
How many frames?
No. It's just roughly so that we can, because we're gonna.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit shorter. A little bit shorter today. We got a lot of questions, so let's jump into the questions and go.
We'll dive through the questions, and then we'll go to the presentation. I just want to make sure the presentation wasn't 45 minutes, and we were not going to have enough time to do it. So we'll jump into the questions. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, we start with Patrick Shones of Little Rock, Arkansas. Can Tucker, Jeff, Guy, or one of our other AWS experts put together a cheat sheet list of firewall security group settings for SRT, NDI, and so forth to use in the AWS cloud? Note perhaps in a cloud production Discord channel.
I will put that in the Discord channel. It would there's a lot, and it depends on how deep you're going. Like for instance, if we're using the Sienna processing engine, there's a lot more that we need to open up for it. But just the generals, we'll put a general cheat sheet in there. I have one in a text document, so it's easy to copy and paste. No problem.
And Patrick comes right back with the next question from Little Rock. When configuring NDI discovery servers, can I use a dynamic DNS service like NOIP and use that address in accessing manager, or does it work best to use the IP address?
That actually we'll answer in our presentation today. So that's a big part of it.
Please stand by. Daniel Goldstein in Washington, D.C. says, sometimes we need to screen scrape, but when we use Teradici to access an EC2 instance, it resizes the aspect resolution whenever I resize my Teradici utility on my local computer. How do I force an EC2 instance to have a constant screen size?
Exactly what I am doing here today is I connect a 1920 by 1080 monitor, and because I have a widescreen as my normal monitor, and then I basically only run the Teradici on that 1920 by 1080, and I leave it not necessarily full screen, but I window it out to that so that it's as close to 1920 by 1080. That is a feature of Teradici, and the reason they do that is to save bandwidth on the transmit. So if you don't need a full 1920 by 1080 or 4K, because it's going to give you whatever your monitor is to the remote machine, to the virtual machine, then if that's the case, then just window it down. But it's irritating. I completely agree that it's one thing about Teradici that I don't like is when you resize the window, because there's certain software I use that has to do 1920 by 1080, and the GUI just completely goes bruh whenever you resize. So I would very much recommend just dedicating it to a specific monitor size and leaving it on that monitor.
Patrick Shones is back next from Little Rock with what size G4DN is recommended for a Zoom instance that's being used to feed into a breakout room?
We started off with the 1XL, but we moved to the 2XL if your meetings are really large. We recently did a fairly large event with 36,000 or something plus people. For each one of those meetings, we're pushing 400 or 500 people in a meeting. We found that manipulating the breakout rooms, the responsiveness on a single XL started to suffer a little bit. So we went up to a 2XL and things smoothed out quite a bit after that. So that's the G4N 2XL, and it's just money, guys. Just turn up the power.
Panelist George Kennedy says from Washington, Jeff, why is the Teradici PC over IP for Mac so limited for connecting to multiple instances versus the PC over IP for Windows that allows multiple connects to separate windows?
Great question, George. I have a saying, and I think I probably may have posted that in the Discord, though, is friends don't let friends use Macs for production. And you're my friend, George, but that is just a problem with Teradici and its interface. Notice that the transport is PC over IP, not Mac over IP. So it's going to be centric to the PC. Buy more PCs.
Daniel Goldstein of Washington, D.C., back with twice an EC2 instance, says password is not available. Please wait 4 minutes after launching, even when it's been 20 minutes. Any suggestions?
Reboot. Do a reboot on the instance from the dashboard, the AWS dashboard.
Go truck.
So something I've found is if you actually take a snapshot of an instance and you try and relaunch that, what it does is it won't allow you to grab that password. So what you need to do is go back to your original instance that you created, do that same thing, decrypt the password, and use that original password, and that should work.
And then Eddie Martinez is next from Sacramento. Would Zoom require less GPU than vMix or OBS? Why the same GPU for each when vision mixing, I expect, takes more resources than Zoom?
No, Zoom does not. As I said earlier, a 1X will work. Matter of fact, we run a lot of them on 1X. It's just if you're doing a lot of manipulation with that Zoom meeting and not just feeding it. So if you're running breakouts and going in and out, the responsiveness is dependent on the processing power of that machine. So that's about the level in the Zoom. I haven't noticed the need to go to a 4X, but all our vMix, live stream studios, any of our other G instances that are running for vision mixing or 4X, a few are 8X, but most of them right at 4X.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, and I've actually tested all types of instances from a micro all the way up, and I found that it stutters a lot if you don't use a G instance, like a G4DN. So that's the reason why. And then the second reason is I use Parsec, and Parsec requires a GPU, otherwise it will not work in the cloud. So they're the reasons why we always use a G4 for Zoom.
And then Michelle McGregor's up next from Minneapolis. If you have already asked for an increase in available vCPU, but you have not implemented that into your instance, can you increase your vCPU while you are running your instance during a broadcast if you need more, if you decide you need more power at the last minute?
You got to plan ahead. Yep, got to plan ahead. You cannot change it while the machine is running. This would be like, just think of it the equivalent of you have your computer running, you're pulling the processor out, and you're putting a new one in. You don't want to do that while you're running. So you definitely have to shut down. Matter of fact, I just did it a few minutes ago. We were in our demo machines. We started out a little bit thin. I had a Zoom instance that I was trying to run Live Stream Studio on, and Live Stream Studio did not like that because I had it turned down. And so I just turned the volume, stopped it, turn the volume up, and that is the beauty, is the scalability of an AWS or Azure, whatever cloud you're using. That's the beauty of that instance, is that you can just turn the volume up, and it's just, you just have to be off. That's all.
Chirag, and then Guy.
Yeah, and so anytime you run a G instance, you require a certain number of vCPUs. And so for an XL, it's 4, 2XL, it's 8, etc. In the chat, I've posted some of those. There's also a calculator you can do. So you can add all the instance types you want. Say you're running a vMix and 4 Zoom machines, you can put that in the calculator and it'll tell you exactly how many vCPUs you need in order to run that setup.
Good, Guy.
Yeah, and then be careful when you do that you have your license for vMix readily available, because it will forget its head, so to speak, and it'll say, I recognize that there's been new hardware, and so it will require you to enter in that license again. You don't want to be in the middle of a show and not have your license with you, so be careful upgrading your instance in the middle or when you don't have all your resources available.
Next up is Steve Fisher from Pittsburgh, who says, NDI tools on Teradici. I have installed it, yet I can't seem to find the virtual inputs to change the source to vMix audio master. Any ideas where I might have misstepped in the install process of NDI tools that the virtual inputs aren't available to me?
It's actually not probably a misstep. Do a reboot first, then see if those, if you're talking about it was either, used to be called the virtual input, now it's called webcam input, same thing, but it allows you to bring NDI sources into Zoom or Skype or whatever you have running on your machine. So start off with a reboot. If that doesn't work, then you need to go down into Task Manager and kill that process and then restart it. Sometimes that process gets hung. MITK is aware of it, and it is specific to server. Actually, more so. You don't see that on a regular Windows 10 device. So if you're in Azure and running on Windows 10 Pro, you won't see that, but it just happens to be with the server software. It's just a little hang up there, but they are aware of it. I was very adamant at bringing it to their attention.
Alex
Keep going.
Alex
Next question.
Olegnowitz of Toronto. When going from a vMix EC2 instance to an AWS Media Live, isn't there a better and faster way than an RTMP that may actually leave the data center before going back to the AWS MS?
Funny, I just had a conversation with AWS yesterday. There's some good things coming. Some really, really good things coming. And one of theirs is their CDI that is going to allow some entry points and allow us to bridge things together in the networks, between their networks and our networks. But that is definitely things to change coming forward. Right now, unfortunately, you've got to either send out RTMP, but I believe there are supporting SRT now into Media Live, so that's an option also.
Next question.
George Kennedy's up next from Washington, D.C. Jeff and Tucker, well, Tucker's not here today, but why more than one security group? I currently have one main group that has all my inbounds listed.
You had more, George?
Go, George.
No, I was going to wait for you to answer it, and then I just had a one thing to add.
My policy, and it's kind of like Tucker's too, is I use the security groups to turn things on and off. So I unfortunately don't have the same, or unfortunately we have different views in some of that. I will use a security group to turn off all ports if I'm in testing. So I may open up all my ports for a few moments just so that I could see and make sure that everything's working and I know there's no problem there, and then close it back off. So with a security group, you could toggle, with a separate security group, you could toggle that on and off without actually editing the security group itself. The other side of that too is it's just an easier way to manage certain things. So like if I don't need to have all my SRT ports, if I'm using SRT, I don't need to have those open on a specific instance and I want to tighten up security, then I may only have just my NDI ports exposed. And then the other side of that too is if I just wanted to have remote control, period, that's all I want, then I'll just have just those ports. So it's a matter of just easy of toggling, George.
Okay,
Mike.
so I guess when we first started out, we kind of started building, and I just put everything into one security group. For instance, once you start building out those Teradici instances, it'll keep on asking for security groups. So should you put all your Teradicis into one security group by itself and just add that to your instance?
So every time you build a new instance, sometimes it'll show default. And so it's creating a new security group because it thinks you don't have that one already. So I immediately created a group and I started deleting all those default ones that come up because it usually is just the Teradici ports that are there. Teradici, I think RDP. And so I will just go ahead and bypass that part when I'm creating a new instance, and I always use my custom. And so in which I have custom ones set for NDI, SRT, or I might have, and then I have another custom that's all internal. So I let up all my, and by the way, guys, anybody out there and gals, and congratulations, Liberty, by the way, for coming in. Love seeing some success. One of the things, and I think we touched on it last week, but I just want to make sure we reiterated this again. So to keep your audio flowing efficiently between devices in a VPC, which is where we're growing to today, multiple virtual machines within a VPC, open up all your ports internally in that VPC so that device in that subnet, all those devices are fully open ports, all ports. That there is there was a bug earlier this probably about 2 or 3 months ago that we identified that if you had even just certain ports open, NDI at times specifically with vMix, it was something between NDI and vMix, that the audio may drop out periodically. I mean, like for a millisecond. But what we did is we opened up all those ports as a testing mode. And because it's internally, it's not a problem with security. I still have the security group on the external ports that are filtering out any bad stuff from happening, but the internal is all my machines talking to themselves. So think of that as your local network. I do open up all the ports in that side, and then audio is flowing freely and fine.
So just one last quick point, Jeff, and I think maybe you'll mention it later on down the road, but what we need to be careful with is as everyone starts to build these instances and you leave your layer, which is your home, and go somewhere else to a different venue, you need to make sure that you put in the IP address of that venue into your security group, because you will never get connected to your instances. So I know you guys probably going to mention that later.
Yeah, and I differ from doing that myself. Though I have it because I have a static IP here, 3 static IPs that I use on 3 different ISPs. So I have to put all 3 of those in here at the office and the MCR. But whenever we're on the road, I do have, depending on what it is. So it depends on the security group of what you're using. So if it's SRT or remote input ingest, then those need to have the 0.0.0.0/0 so that it is available to everybody. Otherwise, you're going to basically only be able to contribute from your place, and that doesn't work when you're trying to get people from all over the world. So yeah, you have to be wary about that. Make sure you do have some rules in place, and again, that could be a separate security group. So you could go, hey, I'm away from home, and then you could apply that security group to those, and then when you get back at home or office, and you could turn that group off, you're away off, and then you're secure again just from your IP address. But it is smart to use it from just your IP address if that's what you can do.
And George, I just have to ask you, what camera are you using?
This is the pocket camera. This is the pocket camera 4K.
That looks really good. All right. Anyway, next question.
Mike Graham of Larchmont, New York is next with, are any specific steps required to ensure separate instance setups of vMix, Zoom, and PowerPoint are all on the same subnet in order to use NDI?
Stand by 5 minutes.
Okay, he's going to cover that. Aaron Clarefield looks like from Toronto, when running a local Mac, what is the best way to access multiple instances, vMix and Zoom feeds and sends, to monitor and adjust them?
I'm assuming, Guy, you want to take that? Is that basic? You use Macs more than I do.
I'm using Teradici, and then for today, I'm using a combination of Teradici and TeamViewer. And if I need to run even more, I'll do RDP just on the Mac. Just download the Microsoft RDP software. So there's 3. What's the other one? Parsec is another one if you still need to keep going. But yeah, like George was saying earlier, you only get 3 or you only get 1 of Teradici on the Mac side. So you can't launch a bunch of instances, even though I like Teradici the most because of just how smooth the playback is. And it looks like Beiju wants to continue this.
Yeah, on the Mac, basically, I had run into that issue as well, especially with Parsec. So what I've been using is that I use a VNC, because you can have multiple VNC sessions open at the same time on the Mac. So I'll often have VNC set up in parallel to Parsec. So I'll use Parsec for my switcher and use VNC for monitoring, for remote controlling other things. And No Machine also seems to do a really nice job, and it supports multi-monitors as well. So that's something worth looking at as well.
So Mike, Graham.
Taylor,
oh,
go ahead.
Yeah, Guy, this actually is kind of part 2 of that question. With TeamViewer, does it ever flag you for commercial use since you're connecting to something in AWS? Like if I try to use the free version, is that going to cause an issue? Or do you have a
flagging me right now, matter of fact? Jeff is going to grab it.
It's notorious for that. That's why I was asking.
Well, this is the reason it's a commercial product. So if you're using it for commercial uses, pay for it. I'm sorry to be blunt about it, but they're a business and they work. So I pay for it. And I have a commercial license. So actually what Guy is in my license is probably just not signed in right now, Guy, but you should not see it because that computer that we're going to be showing today is on my license. And I've got like 400 computers on my license, but that is, every time we spin up instances, we're having to add it in. It's part of the pain, Taylor. I'm sorry, but yeah, if you want to use the tool, you got to pay to use the tool, unfortunately.
No, understandable. Just curiosity question.
Yeah, and it is, and yes, it is
$50.
No, yeah, Teradici is actually less painful if you have a small account. Now, granted, like I said, I'm controlling. I got over 200 machines just in my VPC, but I've also got another 100 machines that are sprinkled around in our productions and such that we use and all around the place. But if you're only having 4 or 5, then Teradici is actually a little bit more cost effective. And it's $250, but it's $250 a year. I want to say but even a 3-user license so that's $12.50, and they only sell. That's one thing about Teradici. Unless you're using an AWS, you can buy a year on an AWS instance, and it'll only be $250. Other than the 50 cents per hour, if you're doing the Teradici instance, the AMI, if you build off of that and use that, it's an extra 50 cents per hour. Or it's cheaper. If you plan on using it a lot, go ahead and buy the year at $250. Now, the next step up from that, now, if you were buying individual license to put, sorry for the shaking, guys, I'm keep moving my desk. If you're buying individual license to put on individual machines that are your licenses, you have to buy it. For whatever reason, they do it as a minimum of 5 machines. So that's $12.50. And you could buy from their vendors. They have multiple vendors going out. But past the Teradici, when you get into TeamViewer, I want to say our 3-user license is somewhere around $1,800 a year or something like that. And I keep increasing it.
For what I want to use it for, I have a nonprofit discount too, so that'll help. So yeah, understandable. Thanks.
Sure thing. Next question.
Comes in from Mike Grab of Larchmont, New York. I read that accessing Teradici via Parsec allows viewing only on one monitor. What should I use when I want to use 3 monitors to access vMix? Also, my monitors are connected to my laptop via Thunderbolt and via USB. Will that work? And note, I use those 14-inch monitors with vMix on my laptop currently without issue.
Heavy question.
I'm honestly, I'm more confused than anything, because why would you be accessing Teradici via Parsec? Teradici is the way to access it. Parsec, unless you're just doing layers of a machine controlling a machine, which was cool if you wanted. I'm doing it now, but yeah, I'm gonna have to ask for a revision on that, or just message me privately, Mike, if you want to, and we could work it out. I'm sure.
Next question.
Moving on, Greg Gibson of Washington, D.C. says, I got an email from Teradici that an AMI update is available for my instance. Is there a way to upgrade the Teradici software on my existing machine rather than having to rebuild a machine from scratch using the AMI? I just got this machine set up the way I want it.
I've done it before, and it just is, you got to boot up via RDP. And so you can't go into it via Teradici because it can't update itself that way. So you got to go in RDP and then update it, and then update both sides, the client and the server.
And if we're moving on, Mark Hadley in Seattle says, should I put a Terraform on my roadmap?
We don't know. I don't even know what a Terraform is.
Yes, you should.
We think that everything should be on the roadmap. It just depends on where in the roadmap. Let us know if you ever ask a question, what you're trying to do with it. Absolutely. Next question.
Greg Gibson, Washington, is back with, is 4x4K monitors too big a lift for Teradici/Nice? I see a lot of lag and ghosting in Teradici. What's your recommended monitor setup for connections to multiple machines?
As I sit here and listen to my computer, which I'm thank God I moved it over yesterday. I cleared off, it was on my desk, and it's a rack mount, so I push it on the ground over there. It is super loud right now because the fans are running like 99%. So your local machine does do some of the lifting. So it's not all the remote machines doing that. So keep in mind your graphics card, your CPU that you have on your local machine is going to be a little bit, I guess you would say, if you got a little low powered laptop, you're going to have a different experience trying to control multiple machines in the cloud, whatever process you're using, whether it's Teradici or Parsec or whatever. But for 4Ks, no, sir. I would not even try it. 2, okay, but not 4.
Next question.
Steve Fisher, Pittsburgh. Any tips on NDI tools install on Teradici? I have installed, yet I have no capacity to change the source on my virtual input in Teradici. It is not available in the tray as Tucker's was in class number 1.
That we answered earlier. Same roughly the same question. Reboot, and then if not, kill the process and then restart it.
Okay. And the last question in this section, Tim Gross in San Francisco says, is anyone making an NDI to SDI solution that's not just a little dongle mini converter, but something more like a server that you would send 10 plus NDI streams to, and it would play back via Osprey or a similar SDI card?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Sienna. Absolutely. Yeah. We're preparing one right now that's it has dual 8 input output cards in it, and I'm purposely testing it right now to be able to do so. It'll be able to do 16 outputs. But yeah, that's the idea. 16 3Gs.
That's great. All right, I think we've gotten through the opening questions. I really like the model of gathering up all the questions that came up about AWS beforehand and just coming into it and like getting all that out of the way and then jumping into the talk. And so anyway, Jeff, who's doing the presentation, or is it Jeff?
So I'll go ahead and roll it in just so that we can get the 30,000 foot view. So we're going to be taking a look at NDI Access Manager, which will allow us, this is the lightweight way, and this is the way I run mine. Access Manager will allow us to hook multiple instances on the same subnet together. And then NDI Discovery Server is something we'll hit at the end if we have time. That's the more advanced way of doing things. So we're going to connect a Zoom instance or two. I have my fish tank downstairs live, and we'll connect that into vMix and live stream, and we'll see how it looks. So go ahead and take it away.
I'm going to need the ability to share my screen, please. So if someone would push that to me.
And I noticed my status has changed to co-host, and I just wanted to make sure that me touching my display isn't changing the output for the show. Normally, I'm not a co-host, so I don't mess with that.
Is Jeff a co-host now?
Jeff had to leave, I guess. I just
no, Jeff Keithley.
Oh, Jeff Keithley. Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff Keithley is a co-host now, and Bill, you're no longer a co-host.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys, here we go. And I'm apologize. My monitor is actually off-centered and up, so I'm going to kind of be looking like I'm looking at the sky. I'm not ignoring you. I'll try to remember to look at the camera every once in a while too, if you happen to see me. So the simple part of once you install NDI tools, it comes with NDI Access Manager. And what NDI Access Manager says is, I want to see this IP address over there, and I want to make sure that I see it and it can see me. So you have to do this on each one of the instances in this model with NDI Access Manager. You would have to put in the IP address of all the other machines you want to see. So when I need to go and open it up, there is something that I was told a long time ago, and I continue with it. And the last time I asked if it was necessary, they said, yes, just continue doing that. If you're, because of it needs to run as an administrator for the best response. So you go to the Access Manager, and it's normally under NDI tools. I have shortcuts on my desktops that I always put them out. So Access Manager, right click, more, run as administrator. And watch this, make sure that those pathways are going. I'm going to center it up so it's a little bit. This is all the program is. There's 4 different tabs across the top: receive groups, remote sources, output groups, and advanced. I'll go through a little bit of the particulars on receive groups and output groups are exactly that, is to control how many people can see you. So whenever we did NAB within MITK, I was on one of their, I had a booth, part of my Pizzazz company, that we had showed some of our NDI products. We interconnected everything at the LVCC. So we were on their network, which I think was the Smart City Network, or whoever the vendor was. And then all the machines in these different booths, which was, I think there was somewhere around 14, 15 different booths that were all part of the network, both in the South Hall, North Hall, all over the LVCC. We could see all of our traffic because we had a single group that was part, and then nobody else could see us if they were on that network, but that allowed us to manage that. And there was like 200, 300 sources of NDI coming from all these vendors, it worked beautifully. It was really fun. But that's where receive groups and output groups kind of come in, and it helps you control what machines can see what. It's not really applicable if you only have 4 machines. But whenever you get to larger type of deployments, you might want to consider that. That's just a tool there. So those are basically hand in hand. The remote sources is where we'll really concentrate. I'll come back to that. I'm just going to click on the advanced and look at it real quick. You don't really need to mess with anything in the advanced. You'll notice I am using a discovery server. This is in my VPC. And since I have such a large deployment there, I do use a discovery server, but that does not prevent me from using a local discovery source also, which is what we're going to do now. So the simple part, click new. And now this is the hard part. You need to know the internal IP address. So if you're in the VPC, you need the internal IP address. I know my range is 172.30.0. I have no idea. So I'm going to go over and let me grab a tab here. And this tab should be, these are my running machines that I have there currently. And so I'm going to select which one. I believe it was Skype Zoom 1 that we were looking at. And you notice right here is that address. So it's 172.30.0.62. And that's it. And then I know I have another one I want to see also. So I have 3. And it's .206. You will notice that in your VPC, when you start adding computers into it, they will not be in sequential order. It irritates me, but we deal with it. You can, whenever you're launching an instance, put a number in as long as that is not in use. And it will tell you if it's in use once you try to launch it. But I purposely like to have like certain things like my router and my engine and other units. I like to have it specific addresses because I use that address a lot. So I would go in and I'd manually put that in whenever I start that instance. But for the most part, it's DHCP within your VPC. And so thus it just picks a number out of the hat. So this one's 206. So we have 62, 206. And I believe 4 here is, 72. And so then we're going to go back to, and I am going to go back to the one we were working on. So we have .62. We hit OK. Now you don't have to change local device channel, the NDI source, just leave it all the same. And then we'll do another one. So what was it? 206. So 172.30.0.206. Now, if you were in a space like ours is, where we have 150, 200 machines running, if you're using this method, you literally have to go in and type that in that many times to be able to see all those machines. That is where the NDI discovery server comes in. And so then you don't have to do it. So what was it? 30.0.72, I think. We'll go ahead. It's going to show up anyway because of the way we have set up. And then once you're done, you hit OK. Before I do that, I'll just show real quick. When you hit new, again, did that hang on me or is it there too? Oh, there
We're
we go.
seeing your cursor move, but I'm not seeing anything about clicking the button on the group manager.
Yeah, let me do a quick tab over here.
Friends don't let friends use what?
You're so funny. 72. All right, making sure there. I have a lot running. I have every instance up and running in the background that we needed. So let's see here. Okay. Oh, so it did pop up. There it is. I wanted to show on this choice here, there is other things. So in your on-premise type setups, you might want to use some of these other drop downs. In the cloud, it's not necessary, but these are for like bringing over cameras, other NDI sources, and it's just a way of making it easier to do that IPC. There we go. And okay, and I just made up that one. All right, and then we hit OK. That's it. All right, we're done. Now on that machine. So every other machine, you have to basically, it's kind of like creating a mix minus in audio. So every other machine, you would go back and put the other machine's IP address, not itself. You don't have to put itself. After I do that, the first thing I go is check Studio Monitor. I open up Studio Monitor, and in NDI Studio Monitor, you can click on the little hamburger at the left, and you can see these are the sources that this machine is seeing right now. And then as I run across them, you'll see all the other NDI sources that are behind those machines. And that is it. If you see it in NDI Studio Monitor, you should see it in your other software. So now we're going to go back to Let's see. I know we have something coming from this machine, I believe, which is, oh, looks like it needs to be restarted. That's a big bunny, yeah? Yep, I recognize that way too easy. Then I think we have something coming from this one too. So these are NDI sources, and I use NDI Studio Monitor all the time for troubleshooting, and that's exactly what it's designed for. You can verify you have audio and video coming from it, besides other things with it, but that's the main thing for it. So now if I go into, which I already pulled them up earlier, there they are going into vMix. Now, those same sources, those are two separate. Let me show you those. Those are two separate Zooms. So this is one Zoom coming in from the fish tank. I believe that's Nemo on the left over there. And then this guy, well, you see the other switcher. This guy here is the Big Bunny coming on another Zoom session. So those are two separate calls coming in. And then we full screened them, pinned them, whatever you call it. Whatever you want to do, and then we're bringing that source back into the actual switcher itself. So as I said there's those two sources going into vMix, and at the same time, here is my VisVector up and running. This is VisVector Plus, a different video switcher. Same sources, same NDIs coming off the same machines. They're just going two different directions now in my VPC, and they're going in the VisVector. And then lastly, Guy, do you want to go ahead and bring those in here also? We have the webcam in. It looks like we're still missing a few. So let's go to our cameras. So we'll go to local, remote. This is Livestream Studio. And I know this was one. That's seeing itself, isn't it? So same thing, troubleshooting wise, I'm going to go here. And let me make sure that we did actually go. And so I'm going to right click. Again, go to it, run as administrator. That's the key. Run as administrator. It's much more efficient that way. So our sources right now are 62 and 63. So if I go back up and look in these, I have 72, 206, and 62. So I need 72 and 206. I think I am missing a machine. Let me refresh real quick. Because that does sound right to what we did earlier. There he is. So yes, I have, see it moved. All right, so 142 and 72 and 206. So 142, help me remember that. And so now we're going to add those in. Add another. It was 72.
72, 62, 206.
And I've got 62 already in. I hit OK. Now, as I did that, it created a list that all the NDI sources are going to look for, or all the other machines are going to look for. It created a list. So what we need to do is exit out of whatever the software is using that list. So I'm going to exit Studio. Again, I go to Studio Monitor just to check and make sure I can see it. And we should be seeing more names. If the first time you open up Studio Monitor and it doesn't show you everything you need, you can close on by clicking off of the input list and then go back to it. And sometimes you will see more. So on each one of those, I believe we have that one too. Okay, so now that those sources are being seen, we can open and back up Livestream Studio. I might need your help on this guy because I'm not sure if it's going to automatically go straight in or not. We're using Guy's license on this Livestream Studio. All my licenses are made for on-prem. So, it's great. It logged in and went straight to it. So then we're going to add in those remote cameras, NDI, and that just tells it to go out and look for them. And so now, welcome to Livestream Studio. And this is an NDI source of itself there. So that's basically the differences of going through those. Livestream Studio itself is challenging, to say the least, when it comes to NDI. I will say that 100% in public because it is challenging. It needs some help. So we're working with them. We use it daily in our sports productions because of contractual obligations. Their encoding is in transport is Zixi. So that's one of the things we're having to use. But NDI into it is definitely a little challenging. vMix does work a little bit better in that regard. And of course, VisVector, because it is from MITK, is flawless in that aspect. So that's pretty much it with Access Manager. There's not a whole lot to it. Why don't we go back to some more questions?
Okay. The first one from Patrick Shona says, would one of Courtney's B-Link computers be a good thin client option for local dedicated machines for remote connections via Teradici?
Again, like I said earlier, it does depend on what you have in your hardware and your local hardware. The slower the machine, the slower the performance. I could tell you right now, I've got 8 different team viewers open. My machine's suffering. I'm pushing it pretty hard.
Sure.
I use Parsec on all my machines, and we just use really basic Core i5 machines to log into all of our cloud instances, and it does a great job.
And you do you do multiple cloud instances inside of each machine, or do you do just one machine per cloud instance?
One per, yeah. So Parsec only will allow you one per. So we just do one per. So it's most of it is just monitoring, and we just make sure our main machine, which is running vMix, is something a bit more powerful, so we can monitor that.
Next question.
TJ Worrell of Minneapolis says, if not discussed today, please quickly discuss snapshotting, rebuilding versus stopping an instance. Any best practices to share on snapshotting or rebuilding?
That actually would probably be best if we came back to that a little bit more, because it's a pretty drawn out thing, and I'd rather fine tune that specifically for that reason. So maybe next week would be a little bit better, because it is going to be a longer discussion.
Okay.
Taylor Sunderhouse is up next then from Cincinnati with, how do you set up an NDI discovery server?
We will work on that if we have time today. If not, it will be for sure next week. It takes a little bit more than just turning it on.
Patrick Shonas, what are some good tools for monitoring the status of running instances? I thought about scripting an hourly notice for each machine running, so I can make sure to stop instances after a show or after others have been using them and not forget to shut them off.
Shrik's got, he's like a scripting god. Let him handle this.
So I've actually found a CloudFormation script. So CloudFormation is a tool where you can build multiple things together. There is one, and I'll post it in the cloud production chat. It allows you to see a dashboard of all of your running instances, which is really, really nice. So you can see in every availability zone. I've actually tried to find a way to easily script it to send you a text message if an instance is up for a long period of time. There isn't an easy way to do it in AWS, but there is some workarounds to that. So I'm kind of working on that now. So, Patrick, we could probably work on something like that. And as a group, there's a couple of coders here. We can figure something out.
All right. Taylor Sunderhouse of Cincinnati says, how can you tell the difference between an NDI source mapped to a local computer versus the discovery server in vMix or an NDI monitor?
That is challenging, and there's no easy way. And usually we usually do one or the other. So most of the time, if I'm using Discovery Server, I don't ever have to go back in and put those remote in there. I just did that for a demo in this purpose. The names are going to be the same. So that's why you will see, sometimes you will see it twice. And keep in mind, when you do put in remote sources in a local network scenario, it applies also. If you put that remote source in, the name will show up in Studio Monitor, whether there's an NDI feed there or not. So like, for instance, a Spark, a Bird Dog, or Mage Whale converter, you sometimes, like we use VLANs in our productions. So I will go across VLANs, and that's one beauty of the Access Manager allows you to do that. So you can cross VLANs. So my normal scope might be, say, 192.168.10 dot whatever for our NDI, and .20 for Dante, .30 for instance, just general data. if somebody plugs into a port that's tagged as a .30 by accident or on purpose, whichever way, it pulls that address of 192.168.30. whatever. I need to be able to access it from NDI's network, it's VLAN. So that's where the access manager really shines at on a local base. But once you do that, it's always going to have that in your list, even if that machine is disconnected, because it's creating that path across the networks. So that's kind of one of those things that you just have to be aware of, that it can drive you crazy because you think the input's there, but it's really not. It's just a list of it. So Discovery Server works in a different way. Discovery Server means that it polls the network, it sees it on the network, and if it sees it, then you have it, and you should be able to see it.
John Pruitt of Huntersville.
Go, Taylor. Go, Taylor.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. I just want to add real quick on the previous question. If you have an enterprise monitoring system, you can set your enterprise monitoring system to monitor whether or not your instances are running. And if they're running after a certain period of time, you can have it alert you. But that's all I got. Thanks.
Next question.
Okay. John Pruitt of Huntersville. Based on what you just showed all of us, how much of what you did do you think might be scriptable? You were walking us through it, obviously.
None of it. Unfortunately. That's why Discovery Server exists. There's some that's somewhat scriptable when it comes to Access Manager itself, it's pretty much a finger exercise. Shirok may have some more ideas.
Yeah, so myself and Jonas have been kind of looking at that. There is a config file that you can play with to edit. So we're looking into that to see if you can actually script Access Manager to be able to do that. And just on a broader level, in terms of what we do, we've created scripts to, once you log into an instance, once you start an instance, we script things to automatically mount an S3 bucket to start certain applications like virtual input and things like that. So as soon as it's started, it's headless, everything's running, you can go to your vMix machine and it already comes in. So there is some parts of it that can be scripted.
Okay, Jason Panks of Nashville has our final regular question other than Taylor's from earlier that we held on to. And he asks, how is Jeff creating the initial NDI send sources from the secondary virtual machines?
That's actually pretty easy. Let me go back to a share on that. No problem at all. Okay, so from this machine, this is the vMix that is seeing those machines, and this one that must be your push there, Shirok. Sorry, then we're missing one of them. There it is. Okay, so this is Zoom full window. So I just windowed it down. Now, as you can see, this is the Zoom window. Underneath on the tray, you should be able to see this option right here that says NDI screen capture. And that is part of the NDI tools, especially in the latest versions. So there it is on that machine, and underneath the list, you see it over here as screen capture. And the latest version is screen capture HX. I'm not using HX much. I just, because I have plenty of bandwidth available in my VPC, I don't worry about it. I use the regular screen capture. So screen capture allows us to, it is a screen capture. It's hard to display it anymore. Just like this old scan converter used to be called. It's basically just capturing everything on your screen, including all this. Now, if I wanted to select more things like frame rate, which I could choke it to specific frame rates to go into a video workflow, like 5994 instead of 30 or 60, straight P, or your capture settings, you can do a region of interest on it. There's a lot more sources on here. One thing that is nice is you can turn the mouse pointer on and off, whether or not it transmits through this, because this is creating an NDI source. The audio source, you can pick which one you want to use to feed into this. And then the same thing on the webcam video source. This is another part of that. That is different than the webcam input, which is this guy over here that's yellow. This is the other NDIs that are on the network that we could feed back into Zoom. So this is where we'll talk about a little bit on bringing things back into Zoom. So I IP address there is the one of my router. And so as you can see, I've got a few inputs on my router. These are the outputs on my router that are configurable. And so as I'm scrolling down through those, it's fairly large. I could go and pick up one of the other router guests. Now you notice this is me on a green screen because it's a different camera that I'm bringing in through Sienna that is actually going into that. So this would be a feed back. So this would be the return. Anybody else that's part of this meeting, if the fish were watching the meeting, for instance, they would be seeing me talk to them, and that's the feed I'm pushing back. And that could be anything. That could be a multi-view. That could be just literally any NDI source you have in your network. For instance, I think a QC return. There we go. There's a multi-view right there that's feeding back to them. So that's how those two are tied together. I just want a caution on NDI scan converter. One of the best things on a free level, especially in a local network, enable KVM control is quite powerful. It allows the NDI scan converter to transmit through that NDI and back and forth a two-way through NDI Studio Monitor. It allows you to do full KVM control, and that's keyboard, video, mouse control across the network. It does work across the WAN. It's just not great. So it's not a substitute for Teradici, but you could, and I'm just saying, you could have one machine you're Teradici into, and you could pay for that license, Taylor. And then from that point, NDI KVM over to other machines within the VPC. And that does work very well.
Yeah, I also use a tool called Screen Connect.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know how well it is with video.
I've tried Screen Connect. I have tried AnyDesk. I think I've tried everything out there. Doug on the panel is a fan of what is it? Splashtop, which is pretty close to Teradici. It's not 100%. It has its own little quirks here and there. But Teradici there is one that's really close, though. It's called TGX, made by Multidyne or Mechdyne, something with an M, Dyne. And that software, both of these, Teradici and that software, both came from oil and gas. So the oil and gas industries basically is who pushed these guys into creating something that is as fine detail and as quick response as possible. It wasn't us in the M&E space, but it was oil and gas that really pushed it. Now, I would say TGX is kind of largely ignored the M&E space, but Teradici has 100% embraced it, and they're developing stuff to make it easier to edit from home, to edit from afar, to control things from afar with as close to a real frame rate as possible.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, back to Jason's question, just real quick. This morning I got up early and set up that fish tank cam, and all it is a Zoom room that's sending that up. But the neat thing about the Zoom room is I can deploy this at, let's say, a church, and I don't want to go in. I can deploy the Zoom room, and then I enable auto answer. So then I can just fire it up, and I can take control, remote control, this huddle cam PTZ. So I can zoom in, zoom out, all from the comfort of my home. So think about like a sporting venue, 3 of these Zoom rooms, and you can just boom, 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 send them all up to screen capture via an AWS instance. So 3 instances, 3 cameras, and then you've got vMix, Livestream Studio, or VizRT, and you can feed all of them at the same time. You could have 3 different shows. 3 different people could be cutting, the Spanish version, whatever. And I'd love to do this with Matt in the Kitchen, where we have like all the feeds coming up into the cloud, shooting them all out to different editors, and different people can have different ways of editing. It'll be spectacular. It's a dream.
Good. Go ahead, Chris.
When you do that, Guy, let's say you did exactly that. You had 3 Zoom rooms and 3 huddle cams that you could pan and tilt and blah, blah, blah. How in sync are those going to be when you patch them into your switcher?
Totally. I mean, you're like, what, 200, not even 200, like 100 milliseconds, whatever Zoom is, because it's super quick. It's just like you're talking to me right now. It's Zoom.
But when I was asking the questions, I saw Jeff nodding me off.
What?
Well, it depends what you consider in sync. If you're doing a cooking show where you don't have
I just said how in sync. Is it Is it
should be
frame
close, but
accurate
they're-
or is it 100 milliseconds?
No, it's not frame accurate. There's no way it's frame accurate. Between
Right.
3 sources from the same location, taking a public exit, they're not going to be frame accurate, no, by no means. But whenever it'll be close.
So would you do Matt in the kitchen that way?
No, I wouldn't. I would use this.
What is that?
This, sorry, it's upside down. This is the Matrox Monarch Edge, and it has 4 inputs on the back, and it allows you to go. This is an SRT encoder, and so this will allow you to go with 4 inputs, 100% synced up, and either use that or the LiveU 800 that we have, which is 4 inputs, also fully synced up. So they're 100% in sync. That's what it's designed for.
They go up as one.
And if you wanted to get now, would they? If you had 2 of those boxes, would they be both in sync? So if you had 2 4s,
the live use, yes, because they have the ability to do that. You can sync multiple live views together using their LRT technology. That's how they were doing it before the LU 800. You could do multiple LU 600s together. I think the limit on theirs at the time was 4 because it's going to a server that's a 4 output. On this unit, I'm not sure if it's out yet, but I know we've had that conversation. Most people have found that 4 is okay. What we use, if we're currently right now, is the other option is NDI Cloud, which is a Sienna product, and it is a multi-input. So I could do 8, 10, 12 inputs with the right hardware, and then it's encoding it, transcoding it from NDI or SRT. I'm sorry, NDI or SDI in. Then it's moving across.
And of course, then you also have to make sure you have enough bandwidth on site to support that many streams.
Yeah, I'm on this Matrox. I mean, I'm pushing 15 megabit per stream. So, 10, but it's scalable. You can adjust it to get it down if you need to.
But you need at least 25 to 30 megs up.
For 4 channels? Yeah.
Yep.
Realistically.
Minimum, yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think the question Alex wants to ask is, if you had 8 of those, could you plug them into an Atem Mini Extreme and get 32 outputs out of one? I think that's what he's trying to ask.
All right. Next question.
Jonas Tuttle has one in here from Reitlingen. Is there a way to set NDI to be 1 to many so that the sending machine doesn't have to send twice?
Yes, multicast. If your network handles multicast, yes, you can do that. In the cloud, no. Multicast in the cloud is challenging, very, very, very challenging, because you don't really have the finite controls of those networks, network switches and such. But in a local application, so if you were in say a school or a house of worship situation, you could use NDI with the appropriate network hardware, which is going to take, it's going to be a higher level managed switch. You could switch over to multicast, and then the switch is handling the distribution, not the NIC. So in the cloud, though, these instances, we have a minimum of a 10 gigabit. Few of mine are even running on 25s, and one of them's running on a 50. So at that size, I'm not concerned in using multicast because I've got more than enough to handle in a unicast model. So each one of but it is every stream that you assign or subscribe to. So every input, say in my situation when I was running 100 Zoom rooms, 100 Zoom meetings off of one machine, that machine was seeing 100 hits on its NIC. 100 different streams, and each one of those were 150 megabits per second. So if you have a 10 gig, 150 megabits per second, you're somewhere around 80 inputs, 80 to 90 outputs, something like that. But you have to plan ahead appropriately.
Now, how long will it take to build an NDI discovery server? Our last question.
Not a minute. It takes about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It's not far.
Wow.
It's not hard.
Can we set that up for next week? Can we
Yeah,
add
we'll
that
start
to
off
whatever
with
we're
that.
doing?
Yeah,
we'll kick off it with the NDI. That gives you a little time to prep for it and figure out how you want to.
Yeah, I was fairly prepped, but I do mine a little bit different because I do it in Ubuntu, but you can do it on Windows. But it just depends which way.
Okay.
Ubuntu's it gets geeky. I'm sorry, but the Windows is a little easier, so I'd rather demo that.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right. Thanks, guys. Another great AWS week. Thanks for just an amazing amount of information. Really, really. And I think, again, I definitely see that this is where we're going as far as production, and I'm just slowly getting our head around it. so of kind of building that out. So anyway, I think that it's great to see people build up. Chirag, great to see you here joining us. Eddie, I think you're new or relatively new to us, so thanks. And Liberty, it's good to see you on a non-Thursday. Hopefully, we're here every day. Just remind you, we're not just here on Thursdays and Fridays anyway. So it's good to see you here. Great job on the panel. Great job in the audience asking great questions as the producers and moving this conversation along. And so it's Friday. Remember that tomorrow we've got our education and the last Resolve day with Ripple training. Now we'll probably do more Resolve conversations, but this is going to be the last one we have them available. Go ahead, Taylor.
I just want to say thank you for giving me the honors of cutting here today. Appreciate that.
Thanks for taking it on, Taylor. Appreciate it. So hopefully you're now part of the edit team. So welcome, and we're going to jump into the post show. All right. Thanks, everybody.
See y'all.